Sustainable Procurement Day. 24 hours of non-stop content, knowledge and tools on how to embed sustainability more easily into procurement. This has been created for procurement by procurement, and we really hope you enjoy it. Today would not be possible without the SPP champions, organisations that have committed to embedding sustainability into procurement functions, and procurement leaders, in fact, that are empowering and equipping them to do so. A huge and special thanks to Accenture, Bayer, BAT, CBRE, Colgate-Palmolive, Eaton, GSK, Klockner Pentaplast, Lego, Merck, Schneider Electric, Solvay, Tetra Pak, Thermo Fisher and Walgreens Boots Alliance. But a big thanks also to the 5 new SPP champions that are joining us in time for World Sustainable Procurement Day. Allianz, AstraZeneca, Avantor, Vodafone and NSG Group. If you're interested in finding out more about becoming an SPP champion and embedding sustainability into your procurement organisation, then get in touch with us. We'd love to have you, and a huge thanks to all of those that have donated and supported us already. Let's drive change together.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to World Sustainable Procurement Day. It is an absolute privilege for me to be here opening this event. It is going to be an amazing 24 hours of learning, exchange, and dialogue. So I am very much looking forward to seeing the SPP mission of driving change together come to life around the globe in all regions at all hours of the day. The SPP's motto this year is Pledge to Action. And through your participation, you are helping to make WSPD a truly impactful platform driven by procurement for procurement. So from both the Sustainable Procurement Pledge and Supplier Day, thank you so much for being here. And so I now have the absolute privilege of being able to run our very first panel session of the day. But before I jump into introducing our fantastic speakers, we do always have a little bit of housekeeping to catch you all up on. So first things first, this session will be recorded, and the recording will be used to document the event and shared on SPP platforms. You are also more than welcome to access it again. It will be available on this platform straight after this session, and we will also have it available on YouTube after that, which SPP will communicate to you. Then, if you have any questions for our speakers, we are making sure that we are going to collect those and have enough time at the end of the session to address them. So if you do have questions for our speakers, please do leave them in the little Q&A section of the chat on the right-hand side of your screens. You can also upvote other people's questions if you really, really like them. And of course, we also want to hear from you. So you may not have a specific question, but you might want to share some thoughts, some perspectives, and that would be absolutely fantastic. We want to hear them, and of course, we will look to address them. So you can do that by having a look in the chat box. So, as I said, we are jumping right into our very first session of the day, which is CPO Perspectives Implementing Sustainable Procurement in APAC. And today I am joined by Bertrand Conquery. He is the Chief Procurement Officer of Henkel, and of course, he is also a co-founder of the Sustainable Procurement Pledge. So absolutely fantastic to have him. You'll also be able to see Yvette Wang and hear from her. She is the head of procurement for the APAC region in the Merck Group, so is going to be sharing some fantastic perspectives on the region of APAC. We're hoping that we're going to be joined by Jonathan Webb in just a couple of minutes. He is the head of advisory for procurement leaders. So again, we'll be able to share a lot of broad perspectives. And then we do have some pre-recorded sessions with Rajneesh Kapoor, who is the Vice President and Managing Director of Global Sourcing for Walgreens Boots. Unfortunately, he wasn't available to join us live, so I caught up with him earlier last week and we recorded some fantastic questions. So I think I got all of my housekeeping out of the way, and that means that we can start the session. Welcome, Bertrand. Welcome, Yvette. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Kathleen.
Brilliant.
Thanks, Kathleen.
I'm going to come around to you first with our first question, which is, if you could share with us what are some of the key sustainable procurement challenges that Merck Group is facing in the APAC region?
Sure, thanks, Kathleen. So first of all, hello for everyone from Beijing, and very, very happy to join this event, and proud to be part of SPP. And today is also a very good chance that we can talk about sustainability here in APAC. I'm very, very thrilled for this topic. I guess to start with, maybe let me just briefly introduce the sustainability target of Merck Group, that we have actually three parts of that, right? So first one is that we really want to continue improve the customer and patients of health of us. And the second piece is that we want to looking for the transparent supply chain. And the last one is really the ecological footprint reduction, where Merck is really committed to go for carbon neutrality by 2040, which is really ambitious for us. And talking about the challenge for APAC, I guess if anyone outside Asia, they probably, oh, this is a region. But in reality, APAC is actually a lot of regions. So there's so many diversity around this region, and each country are so different among each other. Between Japan and India, from China to Vietnam, from Australia. So you just see so much variety here, and it's very, very hard to looking for, okay, how we can do one thing in a region APAC. That's actually bring quite a bit of challenge for us, because it is very difficult for us to implement like one initiative that we are able to solve everything in the regions. So we have to be very specific about things that we're doing for each of the places. So one of the things that we are working very hard is really on this transparent supply chain. So I think many of the company, if you are based in Europe, probably now you are working very hard on the German supply chain law. Same for us. So we also spending quite a bit initiative to looking at how exactly we as a company is able to make sure that we have all the regulation in place, that we can provide such transparency in that area. And one of the things is that in the regions, it's very challenged that you go to one direct suppliers, but you need to go even the second tier, the third tier, where you're able to really mapping out the value stream of your supply chain. So for us, that's really a lot of work, because we are operating in very different segments. For example, from life science to healthcare to the chemical business, everything's so different. So we need to spend quite a bit of time to really connect with our suppliers, and we explain that why it's important for us to have the transparency, and how we can make sure that our suppliers really working with their suppliers and their suppliers to make sure that everything in this supply chain is to be much more transparent and according to the regulations. So I think that's one of the quite challenging part of us. And second is definitely on this ecology footprint part, right? So I guess for the sessions, we may have quite a bit of time follow up to discuss, okay, how we do that renewable energy procurement here in regions, how we're working with our suppliers, reducing the scope 3 reductions. And one of the things that we have been doing, I think, Bitron is also the leading of the TFS, is that how we can really partner with the other chemical industry to really look into working with our suppliers, engage our suppliers to working on their CO2 emissions. So many things is really together, and I hope that we can have a little bit more time to interact and to talk about this in a much more broader sense. So that's basically from my side.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And I see Bertrand already smiling. I feel like he has a lot to share. So Bertrand, let's come around to you. As you know, Yvette mentioned, Henkel is a member of Together for Sustainability. Of course, you are the co-founder of the Sustainable Procurement Pledge. And so how does this translate into the work that you're doing at Henkel? How are you ensuring that the procurement practices you implement within your organization align with ESG considerations?
So first, good morning from my side, and thank you very much to welcome me this morning in Asia Pacific. I would love to be with you in the region, but it is thanks to technology I can be with you live. And back to your question, Kathleen. I think those three are completely combined. My role at Henkel, at TFS, and SPP. Probably that TFS, the co-founding of TFS 11 years ago, and then SPP recently is probably also born into Henkel, into the leadership I could get through my experience at Henkel, but also we have a purpose like a pioneer at heart for the good of generation. And thinking like this, thinking through this has allowed us probably to go to these enhancement beyond, I would say, the role into the company to build up together for sustainability, and then also to co-found SPP. All of that is very, very strongly related into one. What I mean by that is that the work we are doing at TFS has been a fantastic learning on developing the power of collaboration. I have experienced the power of collaboration to TFS. And from there, it became almost obvious 2 to 3 years ago with Thomas creating the creating SPP to build up that aspiration to have a power of collaboration across the entire profession of procurement. And then all of that is back to the company. I think that Yvette, you talked about creating transparency, enhancing the transparency, and this is definitely the number one mission that you bring into the organization, that I brought into the organization, was to build up the transparency. Thanks to TFS, it has been ready to build up the transparency on through audits, through assessments, through this power of collaboration to bring a base and foundations to make this. So this has been the first step. When we look at today, the recent challenge we have into TFS with the new harmonized guideline for the product carbon footprint, it's again transparency and methodologies to speak together one language and one language into the chemical industry to tackle the challenge of the product carbon footprint. At the end of the day, what we have learned with this and what I bring into the company is the energy of the outside to make it in, to create also the very strong listening and to bring in, and then from there to build up on harmonized, standardized processes, finding the data, but always recognizing that you are not alone and you can find your energy and your question into a network. And this is what we have also tried to build up at SPP. Nobody into the sustainability agenda across the entire procurement organization is alone. It's very inclusive, and this is what you can bring into the organization, working not only into procurement, but also with all the teams associated to the sustainability effort. So all in all, a true journey, and the three are very, very closely related.
Yeah, I'm really getting the importance, and this idea of transparency is almost a starting point, and how, without transparency, you can't collaborate, and without collaboration, you're not going to achieve any transparency. Yvette, I'll come back to you with a quick follow-up question. But, as you mentioned at the beginning, APAC is this huge region, and it spans across multiple countries where there are a lot of different cultures, different politics at play. And so do you see different levels of openness and acceptance to wanting to create more transparent supply chains and wanting to collaborate? And how do you start to overcome that?
That is actually a very, very good question. To be honest, I think it's a $1 million question. I couldn't have the exact answer at this moment, but probably let me just share some of my own perspective, right? So my view is that definitely the region APAC have very different levels of understanding and engagement in terms of transparency. This may come from different cultural background. This may come from different geopolitical system or the others. But I guess as a procurement profession or the company or multinational company who operate in the regions, we need to be really aware, okay, how exactly the local system works. I think that is very important, that we need to operate in the local context, which means that you need to understand the local environment, the local community, the local supply network, and also definitely the government system which in place, because somehow sustainability has been largely impacted by the governmental system or regulations in the specific country. I guess we just need to operate within that type of frame for sure, and try our best to see, okay, how are we going to bring the transparency into that frame, that as a company, we're able to champion some change. For example, I think probably in China, many things are not so transparent. And so we actually are trying very hard to really bring this type of mindset into our supply network. Together with other companies, we're trying to really mapping out, okay, how exactly we're doing things. And in some of the communications we have with certain industry community or industry network, which is actually sponsored by the government, we actually continue kind of asking for this attention of transparency, because this is not only just for the sake of perform certain regulations, it's actually very, very good for the whole development of the industry. And in the end, the country will benefit. I guess this type of the mindsets begin to be more and more accepted by the government, but this is really something, a journey that we need to continue, again, collaborate with each other to push this forward, right? Some countries, they may already have very good environment. For example, Australia, they already have or implement this Modern Slavery Act, which actually giving quite a bit of pressure from the company that they need to be much, much more emphasizing efforts into the transparency. So I guess in the end, it is really the wise or the intelligent of the company, especially the procurement organizations, that how we utilize our resources, our existing process, and how we can collaborate with our suppliers to make this much more easy or much more engaged in the way that we want it to be. Yeah, but here probably one more thing that I really want to echo back the collaboration which Bertrand has mentioned. I guess one of the things that I starting to realize is it is imperatively important that the collaboration in this sustainability initiative, because no company can succeed by themselves. We have to collaborate with our suppliers, with our peer companies, with our customers, with our communities to make this happen. So this is really a collective effort. So I have to continue emphasize together with my colleagues and also everyone around the world is really it's a collective effort for everyone to be part, and then we can make this happen. Thanks.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more, and I can see the audience giving you lots of thumbs up. You mentioned a very interesting point around this idea of, top down. I'll call it pressure, but maybe that's not the right word. To sort of really, encourage companies to act with more transparency, act with more sustainable practices, and it's like the German Supply Chain Act, where we see that kind of top-down influence coming in. But there'll also be practices that companies might want to implement within their own organizations to encourage that sort of more that behavior that we're wanting to see. So Bertrand, what KPIs, targets, talent or training strategies, or remuneration-linked sustainability targets are you using at Henkel to make sure that sustainable procurement becomes that sort of default behavior of procurement professionals?
Well, it started with us to have a clear understanding of the strategy and then a commitment together around that strategy. We call it responsible sourcing, 100% responsible sourcing. And this is first a mindset. It's a destination. It is a journey. And we have contributed altogether also to build up the strategy, the sustainability strategy and objectives of the company. So we have been associated to that journey, and then we embedded it then into the responsible sourcing. As I said, the journey started on the compliance part. So our objective is to have the 100% spent transparency, supplier transparency, in order to be able to shape. So we started together by building up this, and we put as targets to moving further, step by step, onto that transparency until the day where we realized it's good also to embed it into the daily life of everybody, to also put it into the targets of people. So to have a sense of compensations and benefits around. So this is not anymore as an add-on, but an as part of, and then to bring it. It became also fundamental to bring it also into the job rotations or into the role ambition of each of our collaborator into the organization, and all our team members getting this, and also getting also some evaluation on their leadership performance, on their performance of also what they are of their mission. So this is the way it became an integral part. So the KPIs are related to this ongoing journey on these compliant aspect, but now to the transformation when it comes to recyclability, when it comes to sensitive materials, and working on traceability, for example, when it comes also to bringing together these transformation on product carbon footprint, climate, nature. So all these elements being there, plus bringing now the transformation of the chemicals and the packagings to become renewable. And this is by getting this process, by getting this dialogue driven by an ambition and then target and strategies and measurement, and associating collectively step by step everybody in everything that we do every day, besides price, quality, and services, to embed sustainability into that process, is we have made a big step. We have made a big step. Just we are not yet where we need to be or where we will be over the next years, but I think we have made from that point of view a big step, because also not manage in isolation, manage also with our suppliers, selecting, measuring, enhancing together, and bringing that also into our innovation process, so the growth of the company, the prosperity of the company. So that's the way it is embedded. It took us 10 years to come to that point today, but it is very strongly now accelerating with all the commitments and through all the commitments that we all have made, 25, 30, 40, but also these commitments through the Treaty of Paris, where all companies are absolutely very serious to make sure that it is now the time to make that impact, and there is no time to lose.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Jonathan, I believe we've managed to get you on. But before I come around to you, I'm going to play one of the pre-recorded questions that I asked to Rajneesh.
Rajneesh,
I
thank you
think it's
so
a
much
nice...
for joining us for this session. We are absolutely delighted to hear some of your insights. And so on that note, I'm going to dive into the very first question we have for you, which is, how do you identify and select suppliers that meet your organization's ethical and social responsibility standards?
Listen, first and foremost, let me say a huge thank you to SPP for organizing this event, for giving me an opportunity to speak to all of you. Sustainable procurement, as we all know, is very, very important to the future for our planet and our people. And I'm thrilled to be speaking alongside some fellow procurement professionals on this important topic. Yeah, to your question at WBA, our purpose really, I want to go back to our purpose. Our purpose is to enable more joyful lives through better health. This is for our customers, patients, and for each other and for our communities. This spans everything we do, ensuring we have a socially and ethical responsible supply chain, which is fundamental to living our purpose. And whether you're a prospective or a new or an existing supplier partner to WBA, complying with the requirements of ethical standards, as you mentioned, and also adhering to a supplier code of conduct are an absolute non-negotiable for us. We will not work with suppliers who do not consistently comply with rigorous ethical standards. We will absolutely not work with them. Now, our program is led by teams of ethical trading experts. There's support from auditors, small number of third-party approved agencies as well. And this program helps us to ensure own brand suppliers are aware of and compliant with all of our ethical standards and expectations. Now, in terms of how it is achieved, this is achieved through a very rigorous onboarding process for all of the suppliers. It includes supplier training webinars. They are held in various languages as well. because we realize that we work in many different countries and in countries where English is not the first language. They're designed to explain really our ethical standards and assessment requirements. We share opportunities for suppliers to enhance the environmental compliance and really provide a forum for supplier questions as well. I can tell you 100% of our own brand suppliers are audited for this compliance to our trading standards through these audits. Our supplier conference is also compliance is also monitored using a detailed grading matrix that we have, which assesses factories socially and on socially and environmentally based performance standards. And I'm not sure if you've seen our you've seen our ESG reports, but we actually publish all of our supplier compliance standards through our annual ESG reports, which is out there in the public domain. So I'm really proud of what we've gathered, and it's a global program. It's the same program that operates in all of the continents across the world.
Fantastic. So, Jonathan, coming around to you before you were able to join us, Yvette and Bertrand were talking about the importance of transparency and collaboration to really embed sustainable procurement practices. And we talked about how this can be quite challenging to do when you're working across such a large region, which has multiple different cultures, really different politics, different values at play. And of course, then I was asking Rajneesh about, how does this then translate into sourcing suppliers and ensuring that Walgreens Boots is continuing to identify and select the suppliers that meet their ethical and social responsibility standards. But you sit sort of across many of the world's best-in-class procurement functions. And so what strategies do you see companies implementing to manage supply chain disruptions which are caused by extreme weather events?
Lovely stuff. Good morning. Apologies for my tardiness. It's a fairly dramatic weather scene here in Singapore. It's a bit electrical storms just passed over, and I think lightning's just fried the microphone away on my laptop. So apologies for being late, but good to speak to you, Caitlin, Yvette, and Bertrand again as well. Just to answer your question, I mean, we definitely do sit across different geographies, sectors, within procurement leaders, about 700 or so organizations as part of our network. So we have quite a privileged perspective in the different kind of strategies and approaches that organizations take here. And I think the interesting thing around sustainability is that often folks think rather sniffily that Asia Pacific is a little bit behind the rest of the world. It isn't quite implementing the practices that are normalized within EMEA and North America. The evidence on the field doesn't always bear that out. There's a lot of examples that you could see with organizations in Asia Pacific dealing with a complex, fragmented marketplace that enables real lighthouse projects to be started off within this particular region. And I think one of the interesting things around Asia Pacific is that the sheer diversity and scale. You've got about 60% of the world's population here and a lot of big important economies. And so procurement has been leading for many, many years a commercial approach to managing this complexity. Category strategies, sourcing strategies, supplier strategies all have historically accommodated the diversity and the disparate needs of countries from which we're sourcing from here. So I think this is one of these areas in which procurement can take the lead for the business when it comes to producing strategies to deal with extreme weather events like lightning storms over your house as you're having Zoom calls, as well as other kind of issues as well. So we're definitely seeing organizations that are a little bit more close to the front line of potential weather events. We've had quite severe flooding for the last few months in Malaysia, and so it's much more enrolled and embedded into building resilience and building continuity arrangements within sourcing plans that accommodate the different types of risk factors that you face in these different kind of geographies as well. So although there's complexity, although there's challenges within Asia Pacific, there's also opportunities for the procurement function to take a lead and help business guide through the complexities of the disparate sustainability and the different risks in this region.
Yeah, it strikes me that, again, it comes down to that sort of those values of transparency and collaboration, having to be really transparent about, well, what are the consequences going to be for us and our supply chain if these things happen, and then collaborating to solve them almost ahead of time, and being really open again and transparent about what can and can't be done. But Yvette, this is probably a good time to shift the conversation ever so slightly, because I think, again, talking about that need for those shared values and wanting that openness, that transparency, also starts to make you potentially evaluate suppliers in a slightly different way than we have in the past. So at Merck, how do you measure supplier performance and manage supplier relationships in terms of sustainability?
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Kathleen, for the question. So I guess one of the things that we're starting to implement in Merck is that we put in really sustainability as the core criteria of supplier performance management and relation management. Because for us, sustainability is not really something as add-on, but something that is more like we have to do this, right? So together with the supply, for example, when we bring any new supply into our supply base, the eco-value assessment is definitely a must, right? So they need to really show their performance and sustainability. So we are able to say, okay, now you're really qualified to be part of the supply base. And with ongoing measurement of supply performance, then the sustainability definitely is one of the pretty hard criteria that we're looking at. For example, how the supplier is able to manage the assessment and audit. Do they have any initiative to reduce their emission or carbon emission? Do they have any initiative to looking at their supply chain as well for the scope 3? So those are something that we definitely integrate into our performance management system. And with our CRM, one of the things that we also trying to co-develop together with our supplier is how we can build in this. I always really like this supply enable innovation, because I believe that we have vast of opportunity in our supply network, that they are really bring the value to solve our problem. For example, with the chemical process, there's many things that we need a supplier to really give us ideas to change our packaging, to change our process, or to optimize the way that we utilize our consumables, which all in the end result in our sustainability or carbon emission reduction. And I can give you one very good simple example, right? So one of the things that we're working with our logistics supplier is, so because we have quite a bit of cold chain transportation, and for them to go with the cold chain, especially in China, they need to pre-cool their trucks, which is actually cost lots of gas. And then the supplier said, okay, maybe we can actually starting with our electrical charger to really cool down the truck first, and then we go on the road. And just for that hours of the pre-cooling period, we're able to reduce at least 100 tons of the emission of CO2. Very simple idea, but it works. So my point is that really go to your suppliers, and especially along this SRM process, to really bring a dialogue to say, okay, what can you help with, right? How can we really work together to looking for opportunities, starting with small, but all the small things accumulate will be something very significant. And sometimes just starting with this type of discussions, you may find out that could be something very interesting to help to remove some of the barriers of sustainability challenge you have in your company. So that's really something that I really encourage every company. Sustainability is going to be one of the core criteria, such as like financial, like supply security, to bring to how you measure and how you manage your suppliers.
What I like about what you're saying is that it isn't a +1, or it's not an addition on what you're already doing. It actually forms part of, as you said, the core. It becomes an absolute part of what you do, as opposed to something that you try to do on top of, which I think is such an important shift that we all have to make going into the future. Bertrand, coming around to you, I don't think that we can have this conversation about the state of procurement in APAC without talking a little bit about technology. Certainly with a lot of the clients that we see, there are a lot of conversations about what does procurement tech look like going into the future, and how can you use it not only to power sustainability, but more efficient operations. So what role does technology play in your procurement operations and sustainability at Henkel? And are you exploring any new technologies?
So thank you very much for the question, Kathleen. And technology is at the core. Let's start not maybe from the future, but from the past. When we kicked off the activities with TFS on assessment, it was obvious that we had to have some technologies to bring that into one template, and that template to be able to share it across all the companies. So it was the moment where we decided to have a partnership with EcoVadis. And EcoVadis was at that stage still a startup, but we built up on the raising and the tech approach of EcoVadis. And step by step, we build up across their technologies and the technologies that we had to come to today, also to have that exchange of information and the dashboards and the Power BI, into which we can build up a lot of dashboards and inputs. And the same took place also for audits. So from the beginning, it is obvious that technology and sustainability are extremely important to be able to reach everybody, especially if you work on this collaboration across companies, peers, in order to transport the messages extremely fast. On the journey, when we have initiated at Henkel to bring also sustainability into our decisions through bidding, so besides price and cost and services and quality, we added up sustainability. It became obvious that we have here to have very, very, very strong platforms to manage these processes and these biddings. And there are a couple of providers able to bring that complexity to simple and more simpler processes, but to bring very much sustainability at the core of what is procurement. Deciding, bidding, and making really choices along these criteria thereof sustainability and measuring that performance. So definitely extremely important. Into the product carbon footprint that we are developing with TFS for all the industry in the chemical industry, technology will play a fundamental role. We are on the way to finalize an agreement with the company to get all that exchange of product carbon between suppliers and customers. It will represent an immense exchange of data, which have to be managed into a compliant way. This will allow us to transport all this information to destination, meaning the company, where we will be able to bring it into our measurements, transparencies, reportings, but also designs of product and processes. And so technology will play here a very, very important role. A fourth example is training. When we have developed also, again with TFS, this TFS Academy, this TFS Academy is in 10 languages, hours of training, going to suppliers, going to buyers across all the regions, It is transported by technology, providing the know-how and the ability that we are engaging regionally with the teams. Behind this, and this is probably the most important, into the sustainability agenda, at least my experience, is the quality of your data. If we have the quality of the data, and if we are able to manage and to really be extremely strong on data, then I will not say it is easy, but that's the beginning of the ability to manage traceability, transparency, reportings, designs, exchanges, improvements, and to make it a real case. So I think this is there. It's maybe not extremely attractive, if I may say, but this is the most important, because then you can foster the engines, And then you can really manage the analytics associated to that. You can very much take decisions and progress very, very fast and bring automation and bring that to the next level. And technology will open fantastic space for sustainability moving forward.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So I'm going to go ahead and play the next question that we had for Rajneesh, talking about supplier diversity and how to work this into supply chain. The second question that we have for you, which is what steps are you taking to improve diversity and inclusion in your procurement practices, and including within that specifically supplier selection?
A great question. So let me tell you what a DE&I strategy for WBA is. First, it follows 3 pillars. One of them is continuous learning. It's about then building talented and diverse teams. And the third one is about building inclusive brands and services. So those are the 3 pillars. And regarding procurement practices, I don't believe you can take that in isolation. You've got to embed a culture of DE&I into everything, because I just can't believe that you can just do it just for procurement. One critical component of that is obviously our own team. We also want to attract, develop, and continually engage team members who reflect the diverse customers and communities we serve. I think also worth mentioning is across WBA, we have brilliant resource groups, which are mandatory learning and development modules for team members, which are complemented by a range of resources, events, and tools to continue to boost their own DE&I understanding, which I think is very, very important. And we continue to build leader capabilities with interactive inclusion in action sessions from the business. From a procurement perspective now, having told you about what the company is doing, I think we have a supplier diversity program, which we're very proud of. It aims to ensure we provide equitable opportunities and source goods and services from enterprises owned by women, people of color, veterans, service-disabled veterans, people with disabilities, LGBTQ+, and those who are socially and economically disadvantaged. So it breaks down various criteria for all of them. And we have clear targets to encourage participation of all of these diverse suppliers. And then we continue the journey of that to the product we procure. If the product requires consumer testing, then our panels must be diverse as well. It's just not working with them, but making sure panels that are testing products are diverse and inclusive. We need to be sure our packaging is accessible and inclusive as well. And so DEI within a procurement practice is actually very critical. But as I said earlier, we strive to embed DE&I in everything we do, so that the impact is truly profound and can be felt by our customers and patients.
Brilliant. And before we jump into the Q&A, Jonathan, one final question for you. How do you see the procurement organizations that you're working with balance the competing demands of needing to deliver cost savings as well as sustainability in procurement decisions?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's very topical at the moment as well, because we know really that everyone is suffering under an enormous price change across the board. So inflation is assailing all sorts of organizations, and really cost savings, the traditional hard year-on-year budgeted savings reductions are almost unobtainable at the moment. So folks are looking at alternative ways through which they can provide a positive contribution. So we're seeing across our CPO community a big switch from a traditional focus on hard cost savings to cost avoidance, soft savings, commercial efficiencies, and cascading those kind of activities throughout their organizations or throughout their procurement teams to deliver a broader set of value deliverables for the business just beyond those cost savings. The tricky thing here with sustainability, and often a piece that organizations struggle with, is an engagement with the fact that many folks still within the world of business perceive quote unquote a green premium. for anything related to sustainability. So you'll find often suppliers will quote higher for anything that's seen as green. In most industries, you'll find that there is a green alternative which tends to cost more. So engaging and communicating with that in terms of that initial cost increase potentially is critically important for the business to understand. But the interesting thing around sustainability and what it offers for the business is often more in alignment with the efficiencies generated with working with these suppliers over the longer term. So if you look at total cost of ownership, if you're looking at other kind of changes of behavior within suppliers, the green alternative or the more sustainable alternative has the potential to lower costs in the longer term. That may not be hitting your short-term budget targets or your hard savings targets, but actually delivers you that long-term sustainable environmental impact, but also financial impact too. So one of our members actually cites an interesting example where they tend to find that when they start to develop suppliers for their own sustainable practices, the bonus for them is in terms of the commercials. It starts to improve that. We talked about transparency earlier, but enhance the reporting, the awareness across the board, the mindset that Bertrand was talking about earlier as well, is how folks deliver that services for the buying organization. So they forecast about 6% in terms of additional efficiencies in a contract over the longer term in terms of real cost savings over a multi-year cycle, just because of the change in the performance of the supplier sees a fairly dramatic uptick. And that's noticeable in this region and all the others as well. So it's a tricky issue for procurement professionals to deal with. We have to overcome and address that there is a cost premium in the short term, but we also need to be able to evidence and advocate for the potential for the longer term cost reductions of more sustainable supply.
Brilliant. I remember interviewing someone from Unilever for Digital Procurement World last year, and she talked about how, unfortunately right now, it just does cost more to implement sustainable practices in procurement. And I remember thinking at the time, at what point does that change? Because to just accept that it is amazing that companies can do, but I think that it also excludes smaller companies from being able to really embed those practices because they just quite simply can't afford the cost right now. And that is really, really problematic. I think what we also want to avoid is this idea of having to create business cases for sustainability, because at the end of the day, it's also just the right thing to do. And I don't think that we should always have to have conversations around justifying the cost of something, especially when it is just the right thing to do. But Yvette, coming around to you, we have some questions from the audience, which I'm hoping that you are happy to answer. So the first question here is from, who is it from? It's from Bob Young. And the question is, for global companies that are headquartered in Asia, how do you coordinate carbon reduction efforts around the world? Do you use common strategies or technologies, or do you regionalize those efforts?
Okay, thanks for the question. So probably just share my personal experience. I think for the company here operating in Asia, that how you really coordinate, somehow you need to be flexible, right? So first of all, you need to have a global approach for sure, because somehow you need to really having this global mindset and frame that how I'm going to really deliver something on a global scale. That's definitely a given. However, you need to be also adaptive and flexible about how you do that in the regional parts. For certain part, you need to regionalize for sure. One of the things that I want to give advice is, especially now, I think every company is really looking for the renewable energy procurement. I think that is really a hot topic that we're doing everything. And for Merck, we actually start already quite a bit of research about how we do that in Asia, because I guess that for US and EMEA, probably there's something pretty mature that you can really go with VPPA or direct PPA in Europe. But here in Asia, you need to really understand the different renewable energy market in each country. So it's so different. And I myself is really amazed at how things are so challenged or different between country to country. But the advice I have is that with the understanding about the renewable energy market, then you have to somehow have the strategy of each place to see, okay, how am I going to do that? For example, am I able to do the long-term PPA in China? How am I going to deliver the renewable energy procurement in Korea, where the resources are very limited? And for example, in Japan, how I'm going to really looking at the resources available to deliver something probably can really combine with community services with a local company or local community for that, right? So in the end, the understanding of market is very important. And then based on that, deliver based on your demand, you can really have the right strategy, which has to be really working in the region, but definitely under the globe frame. That is definitely the recommendation from my side.
Brilliant. I love this idea of needing to know your mark, know the audience that you're speaking to and what their capabilities are, and therefore how you can speak to those. Bertrand, I'm going to ask you to close out the session today. We have a question from Victor, and I think you sort of referred to this a little bit earlier, so you're probably the right person to ask. But how do you implement sustainable procurement in organizations like the public sector, which are slow to change? Oh, Bertrand, you might be on mute.
I apologize, but so sorry for that. Anyway, so recognizing anyway that we are all into the same agenda, meaning that we are all there, public or private procurement. We are here to make choices when we are taking decisions with suppliers. So the power of the procurement organization to deal an agreement, to make a contract, is that moment where we have the opportunity to make the first step and to influence. With which company should I engage or eventually not? And this is why at that stage, I think I do still strongly believe into these assessment processes. Start to understand with which company do I work, with which company are we dealing with, and adopt standards and processes that others have already managed. Do not reinvent the wheel. Take the existing and manage it and create a mobilization around. Transparency is the moment of such an opportunity to also start to be able to build and to influence moving forward. It's the beginning where you can start to talk with suppliers and to talk into the organization. And I strongly believe that procurement, which are also into the public sectors, have the same opportunity to be developed. Moving further, it is the moment where you can really go into the specifics of the sectors where you are working on, and then the spectrum is the same. We talk very much about product carbon footprint, but we could have also talked about human rights today. We could have talked about all these elements that we could have talked about education, so engagement in communities, and I do believe that this is the next step, which can be not easily, but managed with heart, with head, and with hand. And that's also an opportunity by managing such an agenda to create a culture and to really mobilize teams around these culture, being inclusive, being very diverse, engaging, and take responsibility. And this is where the topic of responsible sourcing starts to have a lot of sense. It is really to take sourcing and procurement responsibilities with the full responsibility on prosperity, on people, and on planet. And this is the mission. So that's why we have founded the SPP, because we strongly believe that public or private, small, mid-size or big companies, we are all engaged into that same mission, responsible sourcing.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Bertrand, Yvette, Jonathan. I've really enjoyed this session. It's definitely got the wheels turning ahead of the rest of the day. So please do join us in about 5 minutes' time for the next session. We will be joined by Thomas, Stefano Stevie, Vicky Netton, and Insan
Sayafat on enabling responsible supply chains in Southeast Asia. So that will be sure to be a really interesting conversation. But before I close up this session, I would love to just invite you all to continue this conversation that we're having in the lounge area of the event. So when you leave the stage, you will see the option to go to the lounge, and please do feel free to join some of your peers and continue to have this really brilliant discussion. And of course, you're also more than welcome to connect to the SPP chapters. Again, if you select the chapters option in your menu at the top of the screen, you will be able to go and explore those and have conversations with any of those who you feel would be really relevant. And of course, if you haven't already signed up to the Sustainable Procurement Pledge, please do so. You can either go to www.spp.earth or just scan the QR code in the top left-hand side of your screen, and that will take you right there to sign up. And otherwise, we will see you again in about 4 minutes' time. Really looking forward to the next session. Again, Jonathan and Yvette and Bertrand, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.